Carrying the cake, I hurried back home, eager to celebrate. But when I opened the door, the only thing that greeted me was a chill in the air. Scratching my head, I wondered to myself, where did Rose go? Didn't we agree to celebrate our anniversary together? Why is everything so cold and quiet? I called Rose's phone, and the familiar ringtone echoed from somewhere behind me. Turning around, I saw two figures walking side by side down the tree-lined street. The man I recognized was Eric, Rose's senior from college. They now worked together at the same research institute. Rose glanced at the phone, furrowed her brows, and said, "Richard, what's up? Where are you?" "I'm on my way back. When will you be home?" "Soon." With that, she hung up the phone, not even asking where I was. After putting her phone away, Rose looked up at Eric and said something. They both shared a knowing smile. From my vantage point, it looked strange. Although there was nothing inappropriate between them, they seemed as close as a couple deeply in love. Chapter 1. I closed the door and placed the cake on the table. I walked into the bedroom, took out some clothes from the suitcase, and hung them in the wardrobe. Just as I finished hanging the clothes, the sound of the door opening reached my ears. Rose was bending down to take off her shoes. She looked up, surprised. "You're back." I nodded and smiled at her. "Sorry, I had something to take care of. Came back a bit late. I'll go make dinner now." With that, she put down her bag and walked into the kitchen. It seemed she hadn't forgotten that today was our anniversary, because on every anniversary, she always insisted on cooking for us. I walked to the kitchen door, leaning against the frame, watching Rose busying herself. The strand of hair that hung down made her look more human, more down to earth. Rose gave me a brief glance but didn't show her usual radiant smile. The food was ready. Rose sat down across from me. I proudly placed the custom-made cake in the center of the table. "Happy 7 years, my love." Rose glanced at it briefly, then picked up a knife. No candles, no wishes, no sense of ceremony. She just sliced the cake gently with the knife. The engagement ring fell out of the half-sliced cake, making a soft ding sound as it landed in the plate. I had imagined countless surprises in my mind, where I would cry tears of joy, but none of that happened. Rose just looked at me with a complicated expression. We sat across from each other, silent, as if the air had frozen. The anniversary of our 7-year relationship, something I had looked forward to for so long, something I had rehearsed proposals for countless times in my mind. And yet, I messed it up. Maybe it just wasn't the right time. I steadied my emotions and broke the silence. "Darling, what's wrong? Are you upset?" Rose pursed her lips, glancing at the ring on the plate. "I'm not upset. Let's eat. I'm just not feeling well today." I noticed her strange behavior, but I didn't press the issue. Since she didn't want to talk, I wouldn't pry. After all, everyone needs their own space, even couples, and it's not right to intrude. We ate in silence, and no one touched the cake in the middle of the table, nor did anyone look at the lonely ring lying there. The atmosphere was incredibly oppressive, and even I, who usually remained calm, felt a little irritated. Dinner on our anniversary shouldn't feel like this. I tried to ease the tension with a topic. "Darling, guess where I went on my business trip?" "Richard, let's break up." Rose put down her bowl and stared directly at me. I froze, staring at her without blinking. From her eyes, I saw confusion, exhaustion, and a deep sense of helplessness. Why? Chapter 2. I wanted to know the answer. Everything seemed fine before my business trip. Rose lowered her head, silent. "Can you give me a reason? Is it because of Eric?" At the mention of Eric's name, Rose looked up in surprise. "How could you think that of me?" "Then what should I think? You have to give me a reason. Why are you suddenly breaking up?" My voice was a little raised. "Calm down." Rose frowned, clearly impatient. "I'm tired. Being with you is too exhausting." Those words made me instantly calm down. This reason was irrefutable. Because being tired is such a personal thing, only she could understand it. I quietly put down my bowl and walked back to the bedroom. The sudden breakup caught me off guard, but I couldn't understand why she would say she was tired. In this relationship, why should she be the one to let go? While I was lost in thought, the door was gently pushed open. "Richard, let's talk." I turned expressionlessly and looked at Rose, leaning against the doorframe. Her eyebrows and eyes were still as clean and beautiful as ever, but when she looked at me, there was no longer any love in her gaze, only calmness. "There's nothing to talk about." "I agree. But can you give me a few days? I need to find a place and move." Rose opened her mouth as if to say something but hesitated, finally just nodding quietly. After she left, I took out my phone and started searching for rental information near the company. Adults don't have much time to be sad. After all, love isn't everything in life. I found a suitable room and scheduled a time with the landlord to see the place. Then I put down my phone, but my thoughts were out of control. I couldn't sleep all night, trapped in the memories of the past. The next morning, I got up mechanically and swiftly made breakfast for two. It was only after I finished that I realized how terrifying habits can be. Looking at the breakfast I made for Rose, I smiled helplessly, then threw it away and sat down to eat by myself. The door to the guest room opened, and Rose, with her hair tied in a ponytail, naturally asked, "Honey, what's for breakfast today?" I didn't respond. She looked up, seeing the empty table and my expressionless face, and suddenly realized we had broken up. "I'm sorry, Richard, I'll eat out." I didn't reply. I just silently continued eating. After waiting for a long time and getting no response from me, she awkwardly grabbed her bag and left in a hurry. The sound of the door closing hurt my heart. So, this is how it ends for two people who once loved each other. This is how it had to be. I gathered myself, went to the print shop to print my resignation letter, and then headed to the office. That night, I had thought it through. Since we had broken up, there was no reason for me to stay in this city anymore. After all, I had only stayed for Rose. When my boss saw me, he greeted me with a smile. "Richard, good job. You landed such a big order. What reward do you want?" I smiled and took out my resignation letter. "Boss, could you please sign this?" Seeing the resignation letter, my boss looked up in shock. "You're doing great. Why resign?" I felt a bit awkward, because the decision had been so sudden. Actually, I never really liked sales. I took the sales job to make more money, to buy a house and get married. My boss was even more confused. "Then you can't quit now. Is it because the salary is too low? We can discuss it. Or if you prefer another position, we can transfer you." I shook my head. "Boss, you don't understand. I no longer have the need to buy a house or get married. I'm going back to my hometown." After saying that, I let out a long breath. I had been debating about quitting for a long time. My boss looked regretful, but he knew he couldn't keep me. After all, I didn't care about money or positions anymore. He shook my hand, reluctantly saying, "In that case, I won't try to keep you. I wish you all the best in your hometown. Tonight, I'll organize a farewell party for you." I smiled and bowed, expressing my gratitude. I had a good relationship with everyone at the company. I was easygoing, liked to talk and laugh, and didn't compete or fight for anything. After 3 years of work, my boss and colleagues had all treated me well. It was only right to say a proper goodbye to everyone. Chapter 3. In the evening, my boss took us to the city's only 5-star hotel. After the dishes were served, the boss raised his glass first. "I know you might not be at ease with me here, so let me say a few words, and then I'll leave." My colleagues all laughed. Everyone looked at the boss, waiting for his next words, but I felt a pair of eyes on me, staring intently. Turning around, I saw Rose, her gaze fixed on me. She was sitting next to Eric and some colleagues from the research institute. What a coincidence. I didn't expect her to be at this dinner. I only glanced at her briefly before turning back to focus on the boss. Richard has been with the company for 3 years, and his work performance speaks for itself. Now, due to personal reasons, he's leaving, and I can't keep him. But I want to say thank you to Richard for all his contributions to the company over these 3 years, and I wish him all the best in the future. With that, my boss lifted his head and drank the entire glass. I stood up, raised my glass, and my colleagues all followed suit. After we drank, I sat back down. The gaze on me from behind grew even hotter. Turning around, I saw Rose's eyes filled with anger. I shook my head helplessly and stopped looking at her. The meal went on, and everyone enjoyed themselves. I had a bit too much to drink and was supported by my colleagues as we stumbled out of the hotel, saying our goodbyes and wishing each other well. After the last colleague left, I noticed that Rose had been standing by the door, watching me. When she saw I was the only one left, she walked over with a cold expression and immediately started questioning. "Richard, you resigned?" I nodded calmly. "When are you going to grow up? It's just a breakup, and you're throwing everything away, including your job." She scolded me, making me feel uncomfortable. "Rose, can you stop talking to me like that? What are you to me?" Rose froze, unsure of how to respond. After a moment of silence, she softened her tone. "Richard, let me take you home." I waved my hand. "No need. I've already called a car." Just then, a rideshare car stopped in front of me. I got into the car without looking back at Rose and went straight home. When I got home, I locked myself in my room. The alcohol was amplifying my emotions, and I kept replaying the 7 years I spent with Rose, which only made the pain worse. I wanted to rush out and demand an explanation from her, or perhaps beg her to reconsider, to not break up, but I knew it was just the alcohol talking. I buried my head under the blanket, gritting my teeth to keep myself from making a sound. "I'm never drinking again. It's too painful." A knock on the door followed by Rose's voice came through. "Richard, I made some hangover soup for you. Do you want some?" "Go away." I threw my pillow at the door with force. The footsteps faded away. Rose was proud. She wouldn't keep apologizing to me over and over. I kept the blanket over my head, letting the tears flow freely. Just today, I wouldn't be a man. Just let me be weak. Just this once. Chapter 4. The next morning, when I woke up, I had already gathered my emotions. The house was quiet. Rose must have gone to work. That's good. It would save us from an awkward encounter. I began packing up my things. It had been 3 years, and this room was filled with memories. I picked up a photo frame from the TV cabinet. In the photo, Rose and I were smiling brightly. It was our first picture together. It was from when she confessed to me in our first year of university and insisted on taking the photo with me. I've always been a carefree person, and I'm slow when it comes to emotions. I first met Rose in the library study room. She was surrounded by 3 girls. One of them was holding Rose's sleeve, accusing her of stealing her money. As someone who can't stand injustice, I had to get involved. I clearly saw that the girl's wallet had been taken by one of her own friends. So, I stood in front of Rose to protect her. I told them what I had seen. The library teacher heard the commotion and, after understanding the situation, reviewed the surveillance footage. The truth was far more complicated than what we initially saw. The 3 girls were all in the same dorm as Rose. Because Rose was pretty, had good grades, and wasn't sociable, they wanted to make her life difficult and get her kicked out of the dorm, ideally expelled. So, they had staged the whole wallet-stealing drama. In the end, the 3 girls were given demerits. Rose was moved to another dorm. She was grateful for my defense and asked for my contact information, saying she wanted to thank me with a meal. I didn't think much of it and told her not to worry about it before walking away. But from that day on, I started running into Rose often. In the library, in the teaching building, on the school sports field. Every time, she would politely nod and smile at me, but never pester me. Over time, I got used to it. My relationship with Rose grew closer on the day of the department's basketball game. Rose was standing by the basketball court. The game was between the materials department and the chemical engineering department. While she was from the physics department, the crowd was buzzing, and everyone was guessing who Rose had come to watch. I didn't pay much attention. It obviously wasn't for me. I wasn't that close to her, until the game ended, and Rose handed me a bottle of water. The crowd's teasing erupted in full force. I froze, unsure whether I should accept it, but she stubbornly looked at me, holding the bottle in her hand without lowering it. With no choice, I took it, muttering a thank you. Rose didn't say anything else. She glanced at me, then turned and left amidst the teasing from the others. My dorm mates asked if something was going on between me and Rose. I kicked one of them playfully. Of course not. I just helped her out once, and she thanked me. Don't read too much into it. They all grinned mischievously, teasing me endlessly. I didn't take it seriously. I thought it was just a small incident. But things slowly started to diverge from what I expected. Rose started blatantly bringing breakfast to the boys' dormitory and waiting for me downstairs. After several occasions, I finally realized she was pursuing me. After she had brought me breakfast for an entire week, I took Rose aside by the artificial lake on campus. I was planning to make things clear. I had helped her out of a sense of justice, and she didn't need to repay me with her affection. But before I could speak, Rose looked at me seriously and said, "Richard, I like you." It was a direct hit, and I didn't know how to respond. Seeing me silent, Rose continued, "Richard, don't rush to reject me. Let me ask you, do you have even the slightest bit of affection for me?" After thinking for a long while, I nodded. Of course, I had some affection for her, a beautiful and aloof school queen, who wouldn't like her. When she saw me nod, Rose smiled. Rose, who had always been aloof in school, was smiling. Amidst the falling autumn leaves, Rose's smile added a touch of liveliness to the otherwise quiet scene. At that moment, looking at her smiling face under the setting sun, I was lost. Just one glance, and my heart skipped a beat. Throughout the 4 years of university, our relationship was great. Although Rose didn't smile much, she smiled a lot when she was with me. Back then, she always said that my immaturity and chunibu, being overly dramatic, were the sources of her happiness. At the time, I was annoyed. "You're the one with the chunibu." Chapter 5. I smiled at my younger self in the first-year photo. I took the photo out of the frame, ripped off my half, and tossed it in the trash. It's over now. Although the memories were beautiful, I couldn't let myself drown in them. I spent the entire afternoon cleaning up every trace of myself from this house. In the evening, I called up my college roommates and we went to the street food stall. I really liked the vibe at those stalls: loud talking, carefree laughter, and no one ever telling you to quiet down. They would just look at you with an amused smile. One of my roommates teasingly handed me a cigarette, and without hesitation, I took it and put it between my lips. "Damn, what's going on, Richard? Is that ice queen of yours done with you?" I grabbed his lighter, indifferent, and said, "We broke up." Saying those 2 words made my chest ache, and I blinked, pretending it was from the smoke. "No way. You 2 were together for so long. How can you break up? Even old people get divorced. It's not like we were glued together with superglue. Why can't we break up?" I made a joke, then raised my glass. "Enough talking. Let's drink." We clinked glasses and drank it all in one go. The rest of the meal was spent reminiscing about funny moments from college, and we didn't talk about Rose anymore. By the end, I was pretty drunk. Sigh. I had just sworn off alcohol yesterday, and today I broke my promise. It seems like a man's vows really can't be trusted. My friend helped me home, and when the door opened, it was Rose who was standing there. Seeing me drunk, her face was as cold as ice. You got drunk yesterday, and now you're drunk again. If you drink again, don't come back. My friend looked at Rose with a puzzled expression. Rose, weren't you two broken up? Rose froze for a moment, then took me from my friend's hands and awkwardly helped me to the bedroom. The rest of the night, I remember crying and laughing, tossing and turning for a long time. The next morning, I had the worst hangover, my head pounding and my throat terribly dry. Dazed, I got out of bed and went to the kitchen to get some water. As I passed the dining table, I saw a bowl of hot porridge and a note. Richard, drink the porridge after you wake up. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. After drinking the water, I went back to bed, leaving the porridge untouched. I didn't understand what her sudden concern meant, but if we were breaking up, it had to be clean. When I first spoke to Rose, I asked for a few days' time. Today was the third day. Tomorrow, I definitely had to move out. Staying any longer would only create more complications, and this was something I couldn't handle. When Rose came home in the evening, she glanced at the cold porridge on the table and looked indifferent. I was lying on the couch reading a book, ignoring her completely. Rose frowned. Richard, how many times have I told you not to lie on the couch? It's a bad look. I put the book down and sat up. Her expression clearly softened a lot. I pulled out a cigarette from my pocket, put it in my mouth, and lit it. Her face instantly darkened. I thought you quit. Why are you still smoking? I gave her a cold smile. It's none of your business. With that, I lay back down and picked up my book again. Rose stood frozen for a while, unable to react. I didn't expect the words, none of your business, to have such an impact. After a long pause, she nodded resignedly. True, I don't have the right to control you anymore, but I'm just doing this for your own good. I exhaled a puff of smoke and spoke slowly. Don't. You're not my mom, so don't keep saying you're doing it for my own good. Rose glared at me, and seeing that I wasn't paying attention to her, she stormed off to the guest bedroom. How could someone as aloof as her handle this kind of treatment? Chapter 6. On the fourth day after the breakup, I woke up feeling surprisingly light. I slept well last night and didn't overthink things. Stretching, I walked out of the bedroom, ready to make breakfast. Richard, why did you tear up our photo? Rose suddenly appeared behind me. I jumped, clutching my chest, and shot her a glare. Didn't you know that scaring people could give them a heart attack? Rose wasn't letting it go. Do you hate me so much that you don't even want to leave any memories? What's this about? Didn't she break up with me? What memories should be left? A breakup is supposed to be clean and final, isn't it? Hanging on to the past is the worst. It's unfair to the people who come after. Seeing that I didn't care at all, Rose tried to suppress her anger. Richard, we need to talk. Although I didn't feel like there was anything left to talk about. Since she said so, I decided to give her the courtesy. We sat across from each other at the dining table. Richard, I know you're confused. You don't understand why I broke up with you. Think about it. Back in college, you were like the sun, radiant and full of energy. But now, you're smooth, calculating, and being with you is really tiring. Do you know that? I listened quietly, waiting until she stopped talking before I spoke. Are you done? Rose was taken aback by my calmness. I'm done. I stood up and walked over to Rose, slapping her hard across the face. Rose, I didn't think you were this shameless. Rose held her face, looking at me in confusion. At that moment, when I understood the reason for the breakup, my heart cleared up. 7 years of love finally let go. Rose, when we graduated from college, you said we needed to mature when we entered society. I, who always wore casual clothes, bought a suit and leather shoes, fixed my hair, and matched my outfits the way you wanted. You said your research institute director was subtle, that even his criticisms were gentle. You wanted me to learn to be more smooth and less direct. At one of your work gatherings, you got drunk and asked me to pick you up. I was playing basketball that day, worried about you, so I rushed there in my sportswear. Do you remember how you looked at me? Cold, disdainful. When we got back, you got angry and told me not to show up in front of your colleagues again. You said my roommates were immature and told me to stop hanging out with them. You didn't like me playing video games, smoking, or reading comics. I changed all that for you, and now, you say you liked me the way I was before. Don't you feel shameless? How can a person be so greedy? I changed into the person I am today because that's what you asked for. Rose, you're like a little girl who likes dolls. When you get the doll, you're happy. After playing with it for a while, you change its clothes to keep it new and interesting, until you lose interest and toss it into a corner. But I'm not a doll. Do you understand? A person like you doesn't deserve to be loved. With that, I picked up the luggage I had already packed and left the apartment we had lived in for 3 years. Once I stepped out the door, I didn't look back. There was no attachment or reluctance in my heart. I went straight to the train station and boarded the high-speed train back home. Looking out the window at the scenery passing by, it felt just like my 7 years of love, rushing past, fading away, and by the time I turned back, it was already blurry. Chapter 7. After Richard left, Rose sat by the dining table for a long time. Richard's words echoed in her ears. She realized how unreasonable she had been. She had constantly ignored his feelings, trying to mold him into the perfect boyfriend in her mind. And Richard, because he loved her, willingly accepted the changes, becoming the person she wanted him to be. But once he had become everything she had asked for, she grew tired of it. Rose sat there motionless for the entire night. That night, she thought about everything good Richard had done, everything he had given her. By dawn, she couldn't wait any longer. She went to Richard's company, only to find out that he had quit. How could she have forgotten? Just a few days ago, she had questioned Richard about his resignation. You're breaking up, and now you're quitting your job too. She wanted to find Richard, but she had no idea where to look. She had never even asked Richard where he would go after resigning. Rose was sick, lying in a hospital bed. Rose stared blankly at the white ceiling. Her doorman came for her regular checkup and happened to run into Rose. The aunt's husband helped her to Rose's bedside. Rose, what's wrong? Where's Richard? Hearing Richard's name, Rose snapped back to reality and looked at her aunt with a desolate expression. From the look in her eyes, the aunt knew immediately that something had gone wrong between them. Don't tell me you two broke up. We were still waiting for your wedding. Rose pleaded with the aunt to call Richard and ask him to come to the hospital. Since this morning, she had called Richard countless times. He hadn't blocked her, but not a single call had been answered. She didn't know what to do anymore. The aunt sighed and called Richard. The people from their dorm were all familiar with Richard. The phone was answered, and Richard's voice came through the speaker. The aunt made small talk with Richard for a moment before getting to the point. Richard, I don't know what's happened between you and Rose, but she's sick now. Can you come to the hospital to see her? Richard's voice was polite, but distant. Aunt, Rose and I have broken up. Whatever happens to her is no longer my concern. I'm friends with you, but that doesn't mean I'm still friends with Rose. Please don't contact me about her anymore. Unable to hold it in any longer, Rose grabbed the phone. Richard, please don't hang up. Can we talk? Or tell me where you are, and I'll come to find you. The call was hung up without a word from Richard. The aunt couldn't help it anymore. Rose, what happened between you two? Rose, holding back her tears, finally told the aunt everything. After hearing her story, the aunt stood up, sneering at Rose. Ha, I didn't expect our aloof campus beauty to be such a drama queen, turning herself into a joke. Rose, that's enough. I won't get involved in your issues with Richard anymore. With that, the aunt pulled her husband and left. Her husband gave Rose an apologetic smile. Please, aunt, help me think of something. Rose really felt helpless now. Anyone who could help her was her last lifeline. But the aunt didn't stop. She only turned back once she reached the door. Rose, back then, it was you who begged us to help you in Richard's heart. The fate you had with him, you brought it upon yourself. And now you're the one letting go. Be graceful. If you're tired of him, let Richard go free. You're the kind of person who always looks at others but never sees your own flaws. You don't deserve happiness. After the aunt left, Rose fell into deep anguish. She knew what kind of person she was. Cold, proud, and self-centered. Richard had tolerated her for 7 years, yet he had never asked her to change. Did Richard love the way she was? Yes and no. Richard loved the complete Rose, so he could appreciate her strengths and tolerate her flaws. But Rose, she had once been moved by Richard's straightforwardness and passion. But after entering society, she started to find mature, stable men more attractive. So, she forced Richard to become the kind of men she admired. When Richard finally became the man she wanted, she realized she preferred the old Richard. What Richard said was true. She was greedy, wanting everything. But no one can be both mature and steady, and at the same time, innocent and carefree. Chapter 8. After being discharged from the hospital, Rose returned to her research institute. When Eric found out about her breakup, he immediately confessed his feelings for her. Rose was surprised, not only by Eric's confession, but also by Richard's intuition. How did he know that Eric had special feelings for her? But Rose rejected Eric's pursuit. She had to admit that for a while, she had indeed been drawn to the mature, steady Eric. But now, all her thoughts were occupied by Richard, and she couldn't think of anyone else. As she reflected on her past, she felt ashamed of her own behavior. At that time, she had enjoyed the feeling of ambiguity. 7 years was too long. It had become tiresome. The allure of someone new, the thrill of ambiguity, had drawn her in. Although she had never considered cheating, her emotional detachment had been a real thing. Her pride, her aloofness, were shattered at this moment. She had to admit her own filthiness. She wanted to apologize to Richard, but Richard didn't even give her a chance to do so. Rose broke down. She used every method possible to track down Richard's roommates. She didn't like these people. She thought they were immature, smoking, drinking, and playing games. They only influenced Richard in the wrong way. But now, she had no choice but to humbly beg them. She begged them to tell her Richard's hometown address. But Richard's roommates just looked at her like they were watching a joke. Richard really knows people well. Before he left, he told us not to share any of his information with you. Rose bowed deeply, pleading with them to pity her. But Richard's roommates remained unmoved. We're friends, brothers, with Richard, but we're not friends with you. Why should we betray our brother for someone who has nothing to do with us? Rose didn't know what to say. Indeed, Richard was sincere, warm-hearted, and his friends were just like him. Why should they help her? Even though, over the next 3 years, Rose repeatedly harassed Richard's friends, but they kept their mouths shut. For 3 years, Rose rejected every pursuit, and Richard became her obsession. She believed that if she could just see Richard again, they could clear up their misunderstanding, and Richard would forgive her for the sake of their 7 years together. This belief led her to reject everyone else. Even though her parents were urging her to move on, she remained resolute. Mom, Dad, don't worry. My boyfriend and I just had a fight. When he comes back, we'll make up. Her parents looked at her helplessly, not knowing what to do. When will he be back? Rose imagined the moment Richard would return and they would be together again. She gave a faint smile. Soon. Some said Rose was obsessed. Others said she would never get over it. But she didn't care. She was certain that Richard was just angry. If she could just coax him, they would be fine again. But in the countless nights that followed, she tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Chapter 9. The news from the aunt reignited the almost extinguished flame in Rose's heart. Seeing how pitiful Rose was, the aunt wanted her to let go and move on. So she told Rose that this weekend, Richard's class was having a reunion. She had received reliable information that Richard would be coming back. Upon hearing this, Rose trembled with excitement. 3 years had passed, and Richard had been gone for 3 years. Rose had missed him so much that it was taking a toll on her health. In these 3 years, her health had been poor, and she was often hospitalized. If this continued, her condition would worsen. The day before the reunion, she dressed herself up carefully, without any makeup. She knew Richard didn't like her wearing makeup, but after graduation, she had been wearing makeup every day. Even though Richard didn't like it, she found the white dress Richard liked the most. It was a dress from college, and every time she wore it on a date with Richard, he would always unconsciously keep his gaze on her. But after graduation, she hadn't worn it even once. It felt too pure, not suitable for the workplace. She arrived at the hotel early, walking confidently into the private room where Richard's class reunion was being held. Everyone looked at her in surprise. Richard's class monitor walked over. Hello, madam, you are. The monitor didn't recognize Rose. I'm Richard's girlfriend. Everyone was stunned. Richard's friends sneered. We heard Richard's married, with kids. Where did this girlfriend come from? I don't know. Maybe the information we got was wrong. Richard's roommates didn't explain. They crossed their arms and watched the show unfold. At 9 o'clock, the banquet started, but Richard still hadn't shown up. A wave of disappointment swallowed Rose. She looked toward the door. Was he not coming? She couldn't accept the idea of her hopes being dashed. As for what they said about Richard being married with children, she ignored it completely. She didn't believe a word of it. She was convinced that Richard couldn't possibly have married, because Richard had said before that in order to accept someone new, he needed to forget the previous person completely. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair to the new person. Rose believed that if she hadn't been able to move on from their 7 years together, how could Richard, who loved her so much, have truly moved on? But still, Richard hadn't shown up, and Rose was genuinely disappointed. She had thought that today would be the day they would reconcile. However, Rose quickly adjusted her mindset. She told herself that perhaps the timing wasn't right yet. She just needed to wait a little longer. Chapter 10. Just as Rose was about to leave, the door to the private room opened, and a man in casual clothes walked in, carrying a child. Sorry, there was traffic on the way. I'm late. As he spoke, the man handed the child to the woman behind him. He bowed to the classmates, apologizing. Richard's roommates stood up and walked over. Richard, I thought you'd become someone important and look down on us, your old brothers. Richard embraced them warmly. After the greetings, the roommates nodded at the woman behind Richard. Hello, sister-in-law. The woman smiled gently and nodded back. 2 years ago, when Richard got married, they all attended. A year ago, when Richard's daughter was born, they also went. They had always known, but they had never told Rose. Richard, you better handle this mess first. This woman claims to be your girlfriend. If you don't clear things up, be careful your wife won't let you sleep with her tonight. Following the direction of their gazes, Richard saw Rose standing aside. Their eyes met. In Richard's gaze, Rose saw only calmness, a calm like still water. Richard's wife curiously studied Rose. After a moment, she shifted her gaze back to Richard. Rose could tell that the woman's look at Richard was full of admiration and affection. A wave of intense humiliation rooted Rose to the spot. It turned out that the only one unable to move on was herself. Richard had gotten married and had a child a year after breaking up with her. Yet she had foolishly believed he would stay in place, waiting for her. Rose ran out of the private room, with Richard's wife chasing after her. Richard, holding the child, also followed. Richard's wife caught up with Rose and smiled at her. I know you. My husband has told me about you. You two should talk. She was a kind-hearted woman. She didn't want anyone to be trapped in the past, doomed to sink forever. Richard handed the child to his wife, affectionately ruffling her hair. The two of them walked silently down the street, one in front of the other. After a long while, it was Rose who broke the silence. Did you have a good life these past 3 years? Richard smiled. It's been good. Shortly after I went home, I passed the civil service exam. I got married to Shinyu 2 years ago, and a year ago, we had Cece. Everything's good. Rose smiled bitterly. If I hadn't been impulsive and broken up with you back then, would we have gotten married? Richard looked at Rose in surprise. The Rose he knew was always on a pedestal. Someone who always acted according to her own will. Life doesn't have ifs. You have to look forward. Keep moving forward. Instead of answering her hypothetical question, Richard told her to look ahead. Look forward. Rose broke down. But I can't move on. What should I do, Richard? Looking at Rose, whose face was streaked with tears, Richard's face was full of helplessness. There's nothing in youth that can't be obtained, except you're unwilling to move on. Rose, missing something doesn't mean it was a mistake, but it is gone now. Let the past go. Nothing and no one is worth trapping yourself in one place for your whole life. I'm going back to the reunion. Goodbye. Richard waved at Rose and turned to leave. Watching Richard's back, Rose felt an unbearable pain, worse than death. Suddenly, Richard stopped. Hope reignited in Rose's heart. Richard turned around and smiled at Rose. Wish you well. A simple blessing. And Rose felt a weight lift off her chest. So be it. What else could she do? Now, she had no place to stop him. It was just a pity. She had so many words to say and so many thoughts to share. But now there was no chance to express them. Richard was right. Missing something doesn't necessarily mean it was a mistake, but it is gone. Rose watched Richard's back, silently wishing him well in her heart. The past cannot be chased. She couldn't stay trapped in it. It was time to look forward.